Good evening, everyone. You are watching 72 News, and I'm your host, Shoaib Zaidi. This is our current affairs Monday show. Every week on Monday, you are having a current affairs political show. And last 4 weeks, we have a show on the Queensland election. But everyone knows that US state elections are the important election for the world, for everyone living in these countries. And I would like to welcome Professor Grant Pitman, political analyst on international politics. And I would like to welcome Dr. Bernard Malik. He is US national and he is expert also in politics. And I'm going to start with a breaking news that I learned Dr. Bernard Malik, he discussed in private parties that he is still expecting that Donald Trump will going to win. And it's a breaking news for me. It's a breaking news for viewers also. Before I guess anything, let's ask Professor Dr. Bernard Malik why is still under this impression that Donald Trump did not lose it. Mr. Bernard Malik, thank you very much with 72 News, sir. This is some theory you have introduced, and many people we discussed, and they said Dr. Bernard has some other idea. I don't know. Okay, could you share these feelings with our viewers?
Thank you, Mr. Zaidi. This is interesting discussion from the point of view that US elections are mesmerizing for the whole world.
Right.
It's big sports. People have bet millions and billions of dollars on this election.
Right.
And most people enjoy the emotionality of elections and don't understand the content much.
Absolutely right.
So the networks are very educative. They tell you what happens. Now, what we understand as a general public, that these elections have been called and Trump has lost and Biden has won.
Yes.
The reality is not so. Because the elections have been, the results have been called on and called off by the networks like CNN and Fox News and CBS and all that.
Right.
But in reality, every election in every state has to be certified by the Secretary of State.
Right.
That happens weeks after the election results are declared.
Right.
So currently, these results that have come up have been projections by networks, and these are not certified results. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
State of Pennsylvania, that has 20 delegates.
Yes.
Biden seems to have won that election by 43,000.
Right.
Biden was, the day election took place, Biden was million votes ahead there.
Yes.
And then they brought in postal votes.
Right.
Amazingly, all the postal votes went to Biden.
Right.
And if you recall,
yeah,
case was taken to Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And Judge Elliott put an injunction that all the votes that came in after 8 o'clock of the election day should not be counted and kept aside. And if they counted, they should be counted separate.
Right.
So that is why the election hasn't been decided in Pennsylvania. It is still pending. But networks have called in for Biden.
Right. Okay.
So
okay.
The result is not certified.
Right. Okay. Let me get some. Yeah. You like to say something, Mr. Malik? Still, you like to add something, or I like to get opinion from Mr.
Georgia, there are 16 delegates. Biden seems to be leading by 10,000 votes. Over 2 billion votes, 10,000 is nothing.
Nothing.
And then they have found there has been, though everybody says Trump said it, but there has been some kind of dishonesty. I wouldn't call it fraud. There has been dishonesty in the elections. They have found out that there were dead people whose votes have turned up as counted.
Right.
In Michigan, in one county, there was election machines hiccup.
Yeah.
6,000 votes that were supposed to go to Republicans went to Democrats, Biden's party. And there are 43 counties that have those machines. in that state alone. So when you take these things into consideration and the margins are so razor thin, it is anybody's call. I still hold Trump could possibly win.
Okay, okay. Let's conclude. Let's take the opinion from Professor Pitman. Professor Grant Pitman, thank you very much for being with 72 News. Ultimately, you are a busy man, and today is Monday, and still we have our current affairs show on Monday. And thank you again from us, Professor Dr. Bernard Malik. Ultimately, I call it Bernard shot. So whenever he speaks, he says something which really have value and understanding. Now, I have two questions from you. Number one, do you agree with the perception of Dr. Bernard Malik? Number one. Second one is there. Do you think that these kind of situation is very normal? Fraud, stealing votes, and these situation.
From the international community, I think most of the leaders of the world are acknowledging that President Biden has won.
Yeah.
And I noticed today several of the very senior Republicans, including Senator Romney and I think the Speaker of the House, have given due acknowledgement to Joe Biden as the president-elect.
Right.
So there's certainly a view that from the international community and from including the Republican Party that he appears to have won. Dr. Malik is correct. There's a process that is still to be played out, and that's probably true in most democratic societies throughout the world. But certainly there's the perception or the view of the international leaders as well as local leaders that he has won. As for the vote rigging and those sorts of things, there seems to be misinformation and information flowing between different groups in America suggesting that there may be problems. I see that Senator Mitt Romney came out today and suggested that there was nothing of any substance supporting those issues. However, until you have a recount or review of the process, you probably can't come to a conclusive answer whether or not there was inappropriate techniques used in the voting process. And certainly America has had issues in the past with its voting system, which they've tried to improve. Perhaps there is more changes to be made in the future in its voting processes.
Right. Now, the speech which Mr. Joe Biden delivered as a president, do you think that it was from his party or it is from the institutes or system they allow him to deliver a speech as a president, as an elected president? Professor?
I think Joe Biden, based off the numbers that he had, the information that he had available to him, whether from the media or from the count rooms, was probably in a better position to say that he believes that the presidency is his and that he wishes to start the process of transitioning into the presidential role and wants to bring the American people back together, and probably in the last 24 hours suggesting that he also wants to bring the international community back into the fold from his term or his future term as president. Right. So I think there's certainly an ability by his party and himself to suggest that they're on the doorstep of taking the presidential election into the next 4 years as their party machinery has won. Right,
right. Dr. Bernard, now do you like to comment on this one? Because I asked Professor that the speech which was delivered and titled by elected president, it was from him or from the institute, number one. Second one, the number of the votes. This time it was in the history of USA that was the maximum votes it being casted. So again, what do you think that how these numbers of the votes are being posted?
The US is a very mature democracy.
Yeah.
What happens in US is as soon as elections are declared, there's a different protocol.
Right.
President receives Secret Service cover the day he becomes president.
Right.
On the other hand, the other party, let us say Biden,
Right.
received the Secret Service protocols and Secret Service briefing and other briefings the day he was nominated as party's candidate.
Right.
So there is a different honor system and respect. So the day they give you the Secret Service, the day they give you the protocol, you feel like you're president already because you get the same thing what president gets.
Right.
When it goes over months and months, you somehow get the feeling that you are president anyway. And Joe Biden is a very senior statesman.
Right.
A statesman. He became senator when he was 26.
26.
Yes. And then now he's 78. So he's a career politician, which is amazing. Generally, when the elections happen, this is one of the election issues. Don't bring a career politician. Don't bring a career politician. But in Biden's case, he has had no other job than being a public servant. He's been senator, and as a senator also, he was a very senior senator. He was head of Senate Foreign Committee. He was head of Senate Judicial Committee. He was vice president. So in Biden, you find a very senior person who is very seasoned administrator, though he has not been in administrative position, but he knows his game well. So when Biden comes out and gives a speech as president-elect, it is not a joke.
It is not a joke.
No. So he understands the seriousness of it. Even if the institution wanted him to do it, institution of presidency, but he was not convinced, he would not have come. He's too honorable for that. So he possibly thinks he is going to be the president and he might end up as president. If you look at the numbers, there is such a big difference between President Trump, who has 214,
yes,
and President-elect Biden, who has 290. Considering those numbers, it's easy for him to assume that he's going to be president.
Even though the prediction which you mentioned that he is going to regain or lost that 8 states which you already mentioned, he can still have the more number than the Trump.
Yeah. So what happens there is you got a very responsible media. They look at the trends and they project.
Yeah.
And if you've been watching US elections for a little while or for some time, you will know that at times projections are changed. CNN will call a state for Democrats, and when the real results are there, it might end up with Republicans.
Right.
But, you know, for most people, US elections are fun.
Fun, yeah.
Yes. They look at it as a sports.
Yeah.
So emotions run high. When you consider all that, I think this is anybody's game yet. I would not call the election in Biden's favor.
Right. Okay.
I want to mention here, sir, that I come from Biden state.
Yeah, we know that you have a friendship also with Joe Biden.
Yes, I lived 19 years in Delaware. And Delaware is such a small state. Delaware has only 750,000 people in the entire state.
Right.
We call it as a first state. So nobody would have thought a guy from Delaware could become president, because Delaware has only one congressman and 2 mandatory senators. It's such a small state.
Small state.
And what we knew, Joe Biden was a household name. I know President-elect Biden very well. I knew his son, who became the Attorney General. I knew all the other politicians because I was very closely involved with the community in Delaware.
Right.
So if President Biden wins, I can say that I know somebody who is president.
Who's president? Wonderful. US president. Grant, Professor Grant, US president, US most developed country in the world.
Powerful, most powerful.
Now, and look at the situation where Trump, President Trump, he says that there is a fraud, there is a cheating, there is a stealing of the votes. And one side we are looking the most developed because other countries, they are following footsteps of US, they are learning technology from the US. How is to happen in the most developed country is something cheating, stealing, or like people are died and they still have the vote, they still somebody use their votes. How it's possible? How you're looking these things, Professor Grant?
I think the issue of people's perceptions or their views about what happens in America can be a little polarized at one end or the other. And so issues of election rigging and inappropriate voting certainly could be an issue raised because they're very passionate from their different political sides to supporting it. But again, it's no different if you listen to some of the elections occurring in Africa and other countries. The same comments are made about their elections being rigged and manipulated. In one sense, it's probably not a good image for the international community because one would assume that the elections in America are very, very clean and well managed, and there's a very strong ethical and integrity process, whereas you'd expect in Africa probably more unethical practices. So in one sense, it probably is detrimental to the American image that there isn't an integrity process in place to ensure that. However, at least for the first time, more people have voted in America than in the history of America. So from that point, there is a great interest in their politics, which is being demonstrated by the people, whereas sometimes they're suggested that they are benevolent about voting, but certainly have strong political views, but they haven't demonstrated it at the poll, whereas this time they have. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if the Americans use perhaps increased technology or some of the facial imaging capabilities or something like that to improve the integrity of their system in their voting and polling approaches.
Right. Professor Pitman, another point of view from the different people that the reason for the maximum vote or historical voting in this time is that the people are frustrated from Donald Trump. Do you think that could be a reason? Then I'll get opinion from Mr. Bernard Malik. Professor Pitman.
I think you're right there. I think because of the policies of the Republicans plus Donald Trump, he's brought back people who've probably remained fairly silent or passive politically, particularly when it comes to employment and some of the issues that needed to be resolved. And as a result of that, that's brought out a diversity of opinions across the American people, everything from racism to employment, through to the coronavirus, to finances, to global trade. And I think you've seen the two extremes of polarism that have occurred, and the people in the middle, the middle ground people, have probably decided to raise their voice in this current election.
Let me go back to Dr. Bernard Malik. Dr. Bernard Malik, there is an impression that because people are very frustrated with the policies and so many unexpected decisions and rulings and talks and speech of Donald Trump's, and that's why the voting become a historical weekend of USA. Do you think that could be a reason?
I like to disagree on that one.
Yeah.
If people are frustrated, Trump actually gained more votes than he did last time. So how is that?
Yes.
I think this is first time when a president is losing the election, if he does end up losing it, not because of performance, but because of articulation and attitude.
Yes. So you still believe that his personality is basically may lead to lose?
Yes, and this is what happens with a lot of people. If you remember, we live in Queensland.
Yeah.
This is what happened with the Premier Newman Campbell. When he went in, he was very strong. Then after 3 years, when he went into re-election, he still went as if he was fighting against the other party. He was going against his own record. So the tone, the demeanor, the ambience, the speech had to be changed.
Right.
Be father all the time. That is why there is a mother in the house. So touch has to be forceful, but soft. I think President Trump didn't do that. What happens with the US, for the viewers who do not know, the election happens on the first Tuesday in November.
Right.
President doesn't get sworn in till 19th of January.
Right.
So what happens after the president is elected? He goes into the training period.
Right.
He's very strictly trained how to be presidential, how to conduct himself when he's president or herself, or how to meet the foreign delegates, how to make speeches. And that is why you will never see US presidents making mistakes or embarrassing themselves or the US as a country in public, because they are too well trained, like royal family. In President Trump's case, I think he got elected, became president, but never became presidential.
Right.
Carried on his cowboy's attitude, he's picking like 16-year-old behavior, very, very tribal behavior. He would go after women, he would go after men. It resonated with the crowd. Some people thought, wow, he's wonderful because he is able to bash Hillary.
Yeah.
But then majority of the people didn't appreciate it.
Right. Now, coming back to this, these are the weakness, coming back to the strength of Donald Trump, Dr. Bernard Malik, his strategy against the China, it's a superpower game. And then Korea, that he managed something miraculously which never done before, and handling the China also it was complete. How are you looking these actions, Dr. Bernard Malik?
I think President Trump is very polarizing figure.
Right.
He evokes strong emotions among opponents and among friends. People who voted for him love him to death. But what happened here is you needed a president who was able to define US presidency.
Right.
You recall during Obama, the US presidency became very weak. US became a weak nation. Its glamour in the world decreased. He was very nice president. But then, as you would know, in our villages and in our towns back home, the sarpanch, the village chief, is the richest man.
Yes.
And the biggest dabka.
Yes, the biggest dabka.
Yeah, his word spells the law.
Yeah.
And that's how US is. US leader cannot be seen as weak leader or too, because US is largely responsible for ensuring peace and human rights respect in the world.
So you believe that the strategies of Donald Trump for China, handling China and Korea is perfectly, it was never done before? It is difficult for a bit.
I give him 101 marks out of 100.
Okay, let me see from
Say another thing. President Trump, though he was always seen as a guy who just did knee-jerk reaction without thinking. But when it came to ensuring peace, he said we win peace by our strength and not by putting our men on the ground. That is why he was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
He knows what US has, what is our strength, and he capitalized on that one. He cashed that strength. He did not want to send people on the ground to go and fight when he said we can do it by being who we are.
So, okay, Professor Pitman, Dr. Bernard Malik has give hundred and more than 100 marks for handling China and the Korea. How you're looking, especially is absolutely, and the reason he mentioned that he don't like to sacrifice the life of the people. He would like to show with the power, with the word, with the strength, and he made it. How you're looking? Is it a positive with the Donald Trump? And do you think that Joe Biden can manage these two big states?
I think the issue that will need to be addressed is the future. In other words, there's been a period of change under Donald Trump, different direction. Joe Biden's people are saying today that they may reinstall what was in place prior to Trump. And the problem that the international community has is, where do we stand? For 4 years we stood this side. For the next 4 years do we stand that side? And the dilemma that international leaders will have is, where do we actually stand? And here in Australia, the issue is already about, where does Australia stand with China if America changes direction again? So I see the issue probably not so much from Donald Trump's point of view or Joe Biden. I see it for the future. How do you manage that when you have changing policies, changing direction, changing strategies? And if you're in the middle of it all, how do you meet that? And do you change with the flow of the powers of the world? Do you stay where you believe you are as a nation? Or do you go with the flow of things? And I think that's the dilemma that the international community faces. As for Donald Trump's approach, obviously he was influenced by the minders that he had, his own personal view of the world, plus his supporters. Joe Biden will have an alternative view, which will be affected by those who are around him and who will influence him. Which is right or wrong depends on which of the political divide you sit. And as for China, China has a set agenda. It's working towards achieving that. And again, it's a world power and in a position to influence decisions on the international stage. So it'll be interesting to see where they position themselves, or maybe even reposition themselves.
Right. So, but now, because U.S. election, U.S. president, it's a name of the superpowers, and another side we are looking that China is really coming and pretending that again there is a lot of issues from the marketing, from stopping the product from both countries, even though Australia also involved from there. So, Professor Pitman, how you're looking the role of the China after being this election? Does Joe Biden, winning, will going to manage the rise of the China, or do you think that the China rise is not related with your election?
I think we're in a global world now where there's an interdependency on each other, both economically and across a range of other activities, including our human rights, our environmental issues, and all of those play out in a world forum these days,
right.
Either for or against. I think the issue will be how Joe Biden manages the reconnect or the rejoining the relationship with China and then how China will manage that. Whether or not it goes back to the Obama era and it continues on with that is yet to be seen. Whether or not there will be a reaction by the American people over that approach from, say, the Trump supporters who have seen it as a positive move to put America back into the driving seat of the power and influence of the world. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a counter reaction in America from the Trump, post-Trump era.
Right. Dr. Malik, we know, and your prediction was already that if the Trump is there, he proved and he managed the China's relation in a different way, equal way. Like if there's something wrong comes from there, he ultimately reply similar way. Even though COVID, he tagged China virus. Now let's assume that Joe Biden is a president. How you are looking, just being a political analyst, how you are looking the relation between US and China?
I think Joe Biden has a wealth of experience dealing with foreign relations. He was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which is a very powerful committee in the Senate.
Right.
That confirms all the ambassadors, that actually sets stone to the US foreign policy. I think, unlike the common perception that Biden would be very weak and forgiving to China, I think he will be very firm, but not confrontational. See, there is a difference of approach. President Trump is always very confrontational.
Right.
In this case, Biden would be very, very firm. He won't have China in their heyday, but he won't be confrontational.
Right. Now coming back to the North Korea. What happened to North Korea after the friendship with Trump? Did they really give their medicine? Keep quiet, stay calm, and no more issue?
See, everybody wants to have their day under the sun.
Right.
You would understand when I'll take a little liberty for Punjabi.
Right.
ਜਦੋਂ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦਾ SSP ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬੜਾ ਕੱਬਾ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ.
ਸਹੀ.
That is why when there was a law and order situation, they'll bring the worst superintendent of police.
Right.
And they'll be calm. Because that guy meant no nonsense. He meant business. Same way, President Trump had a reputation for meaning business and no bullshit.
So do you think if the Joe Biden is there, the North Korea situation it will change?
Absolutely. They would come back to their game again.
They will come back. So like Professor Grant already mentioned that it's very difficult for the world that 4 years you keep on this side, then the rest of the 4 years you coming on the other side.
That's right.
Professor Pitman, do you think also that North Korea will be back in the shows again?
I think one of the things Donald Trump was trying to do was, for many years, they were a country that didn't get involved in international military type issues. And from World War II onwards, they've sort of taken a more lead role in wars and peace operations. And I think Donald Trump was trying to get the world to realize that it wasn't just America who had to pay the price for peace. And I think North Korea was, and I assuming here I don't know any figures, but the American government must pay out millions of dollars to keep the peace in North Korea. And if he could find a way to manage that, that would bring home a lot of financial benefits back to America. Same issue as in Europe. So I think he was just applying the same principle across areas or zones where there were peacekeeping operations to make others more accountable and responsible for managing the process, other than just the American dollar being deliberately dispersed in those countries.
Wonderful. Now, Joe Biden is going to have a lot of difficult decision the main important one of them is COVID, handling the COVID, and still COVID is there. So, Professor Grant, how you think, number one, that Mr. Donald Trump, how did he manage? Because different people could have a different opinion. Just as he managed perfectly. So I like to ask Professor Dr. Bernard Malik also, but I like to know from you, what is your opinion handling the COVID by Donald Trump, and how Joe Biden is going to manage this?
I think one of the issues that Donald Trump tried to do was he had to manage the economy, his positioning in world power, and keeping people at work. And of course, the coronavirus made that very difficult. So I think there were a range of decisions to try and keep America moving, and hopefully that the coronavirus wouldn't take the toll that it has. But as we've seen in Europe now, they're closing it down because of the second wave, and it's having too much of an impact on their health systems and their economies. Here in Australia, of course, we've already closed down twice. So I would expect America probably will follow the World Health Organization's strategies, and will look at better managing the coronavirus. Of course, there'll be a reaction to that because the Trump supporters believe that's an infringement on their freedom and their rights. So there will be a reaction either way. But I see Joe Biden's already suggested an ex-US Surgeon General and another medical specialist, and they will undoubtedly come up with some strategies that I think will probably have similarities to the World Health Organization's current global strategies.
Right. Mr. Malik, China virus, Donald Trump, how he did manage, and how Joe Biden is going to play or going to manage the situation of their country, especially the health system.
Okay. We know how people perceive how President Trump managed coronavirus.
Right.
They perceived him as weak leader in managing that, though he put out trillions of dollars to keep people at the job and keeping them safe at home. But I think there's a much bigger issue than just coronavirus for Biden. Biden, if you see the media reports, wants to undo everything that President Trump had done. Okay, it's a deeply divided country today.
Deeply divided country.
The reason being, we have not seen the elections come that close in our living memory.
Right.
Correct? So blacks have all gone. If Biden is blaming Trump for dividing it, Biden also is to take the blame for having divided that and deepened that divide by calling on blacks to vote for Democrats. Now you got half of the country, and it's purely half. It's not even cent here, cent there. Half of the country that is against you, and half is with you. And you try to undo everything that the other half liked. You think it's going to be an easy job for the rest? You got major issues. Coronavirus is nothing compared to that. If Biden is not very prudent, if he does want the peace in the country, he wants people to grow, he has to be forgiving and not be very imprudent in going and every day signing an executive order. We undo this, President Trump this, we undo that. You cannot take that approach and have a healthy relations in the races. So please understand, most people do not know that US is almost half black and half white and bit of Hispanic, major Hispanic population there.
Right. Dr. Malik, when it's coming back to the half black and half white, and you also mentioned earlier, mother of nation. So, and now we know that the Vice President Kamala Harris is from India, and number one, and you also from connected with India also. How you're looking the role of the Kamala Harris? She's younger than Joe Biden. He's very old, And then do you think that she will help, making a strong relation between India and US?
See, you asked multiple questions here.
Right.
India is such a big and influential country to be ignored by anyone.
Right.
It's too important. World's biggest democracy.
Right.
So whether it's Biden or Trump or Professor Pitman or Professor Zaidi, it doesn't matter who it is. You will have to play to the satisfaction of India.
Right.
When you want to take on China. If you want to take on China, you need to have India in your good books.
Right.
And India, coming to China and all those countries, India is much more friendlier. You will see Indians have gone down and done well. Now coming to Kamala Harris,
yes.
I got lucky. If we are talking about Trump being one-term president, take it for granted that Biden is definitely one-term president.
Yes. Because of the age?
Yeah, age. When he finishes his first term, he'll be 82. To run a presidential election at 82, you need God's intervention, straight intervention.
Yes.
It's not going to happen. My fear is, given his age and work, this will be the first vice president who will be most involved.
Most involved.
Acting president all the time. I hope and pray that God grants him good health and he does his term fully healthy as he appears now. But it's too big of an ask at his age.
Okay, let me get the opinion, Professor Grant. Kamala Harris mostly will play as a role of president. Do you looking on this side also? And what is exactly the role will be from the Kamala Harris? As I already mentioned, did he going to build any relation to India or enhancing the relation? Dr. Malik says, even though she don't do anything, ultimately there is a value of India. So ultimately there is no need from her. How you are looking the role of Kamala Harris, and do you agree with Dr. Bernard Malik that she's mostly going to be involved because of the age of Joe Biden?
Certainly, a lot of the American commentators are suggesting that Joe Biden may not have the stamina to operate as the president for long periods of time, and that the deputy or the vice president may take a far more active role in running the country. There might be also a view that she's being groomed for the next president's role. So you may have the first woman American president or running as American president. So the perception or the view is that she will probably play a more key role in the role of the presidency in the future. As for India, certainly there are a lot of commentators around the world that India will probably be one of the great powers of the world, if not already, in the coming decades. And if you're dealing with the polarization of politics internationally, from a socialist type model through to a capitalist freedom model, then India sits in the middle of it all.
Right.
There's a strong view that India may be the connecting link between Britain, Europe, Australia, and America and Canada. So I see India as a linchpin. Now, whether or not the vice president wants to maximise that linchpin will be interesting, but a lot of countries in the Pacific and Asian area see India as potentially a country that could have a significant impact on democracy in the future and trade relations, and could be a country that comes out of the shadows and into the sun and is being seen more.
Yeah, Mr. Malik has something for you.
Yes, when it comes to Indians, Indians are the richest ethnic community in US.
Right.
So we already have enough influence, and please let me underline this. When I say Indian, everybody who looks like me, whether it is Pakistani, Bangladeshi, or Nepalese, all those people from that area, we're looked at as very successful and hardworking people. There's a lot of respect for Indians.
Yes.
In fact, if you go somewhere to people who know Indians, you go there, they'll ask you, oh, are you a doctor? And you say, no, I'm not a doctor. They say, oh, then you must have a motel. And you say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have a motel. They say, oh, okay, then you possibly have a Dunkin' Donut. And you say, no, then you have a gas station. So the stereotype of Indians there is business people. Unlike what in Australia, where currently the stereotype is taxi driver, the security guy, the cleaning guy.
Uber.
Yes.
Mr. Malik, now let's have some difficult question also. We are almost last 10 minutes of our show. Coming back to the Donald Trump's difficult decision is related to the immigration decision. And then, so how you are looking the relation, let's say the change, could it possible the immigration rules which Mr. Trump has introduced for Muslim country arrivals, especially from that areas, and you know that there was a lot of debates. Do you think that it will remain continue, or Joe Biden might have some sympathy or some different rules?
Is it for me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Joe Biden, I think the first order of his business is going to be undoing law where the Muslims from selected countries are banned. So take it from me, Joe Biden has more prudent approach. He is a very good statesman who is known to have make some comments, but at the heart of hearts, he's really good guy. He's a perfect gentleman, a God-loving guy. He's a deeply committed Catholic. You would not expect the same kind of approach that President Trump did.
Okay, so let me get the opinion from Professor Grant. Professor Grant, you have the same opinion with your analysis coming back to the Muslims, specific countries, visitors to the USA, the change in immigration law?
I think the Democrats' policy generally is supportive of Islamic people. So I think the immigration laws will be more flexible. And as for Middle Eastern politics, it'll be interesting to see whether or not Joe Biden reverses anything or keeps the status quo, but tries to find some middle ground. For example, the embassy now placed in Jerusalem, whether or not he just accepts what's occurred and tries to manage the Middle Eastern policy in accordance with their party policy, but certainly there will be a trend back towards supporting Islamic faith and people throughout the world.
Now, when we discuss about the Islamic faith and people visiting from the country, there is a name coming, Iran and the nuclear issue. Professor Grant, how you're looking at this thing? The good part from the Professor, Dr. was that he will have a lot of discussion, but as Dr. Mehran, he just speaks, but things are going very gently. So in Iran issue also we find that they spoke many things, but originally things managed, things going very gently than the earlier. Professor Grant, how you are looking the relation between Iran and USA after with the Joe Biden?
The Middle East is always an interesting area to talk about, and policy is constantly shifting depending on what's occurring and how people perceive the politics in the area. I would imagine Joe Biden would be probably more approachable and more diplomatic in his approach as against Donald Trump, who was more forceful in his opinion. So I think there will be more diplomatic approaches going on with Iran, just the same as North Korea, trying to find a political solution to the problem as against the use of outright force, for example. So I think there will be some subtle changes occurring. So.
Let me get the opinion, Dr. Bernard Malik. No sanctions, minimum sanctions, or same sanctions with Iran nuclear power?
I think what will happen, he is not going to undo everything that Trump did.
Right.
There will be certain things that when it comes to larger US interest, they'll be left as status quo. Please understand now there will be more trouble in Middle East.
Absolutely.
Because they will see Biden as a weak leader. All these naughty elements will come around. You would also see that this is first time when a president's election has been called in and decided and Wall Street did not react to it.
Right.
Zero reaction from Wall Street the day Biden was declared winner.
Why?
Because people are not excited. Biden doesn't excite many people.
Do you think the excitement is required to be a US president?
That?
The excitement for
You're leader of the world. What is leader's work? Leader comes with a particular brand. And people get excited about it. This is the first time in the history of United States known presidency that there is no excitement.
So, yes, Dr. Bernard, you're saying something?
He did not react. On the other hand, did you see that there have been so many bomb blasts in so many countries, including Afghanistan?
No.
In Afghanistan, they killed 25 people in one day. They attacked Kabul's university. There were small little attacks in Europe. You will see people reinforcing again because no one expected Trump to lose.
Dr. Bernard, you just mentioned about the attack on Europe, and that if you remember before the election, one day it happens, and Donald Trump was in power, and he did not use it. Do you think that it was a failure from him?
No, I think Trump ran his presidential campaign all by himself. So he did not know what is happening. I wish he had used a team and had a strategy, he would not have lost.
Okay, let me end. Professor Grant, do you think that Donald Trump does not have to use the team and he only use by himself? That's why he calls the unpredictable president?
See, you're causing some trouble here.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah.
I said, as you already mentioned, that Donald Trump, Dr. Bernard Malik, has mentioned that Donald Trump operate individually. He does not use his team. He has a very experienced team, number one. And I just mentioned that was the reason that why he was mentioned unpredictable president, because he's doing everything by himself.
I think Donald Trump has probably grown up in an industry where he's been able to make decisions, sometimes on his own opinions. Occasionally, he will probably listen to his minders if they have like opinions or make good sense in what they're presenting. But as somebody pointed out, he's predominantly a businessman who's a politician as against a statesman who was or could have been a businessman. So I think Dr. Bernard's comments are quite right. One of the dilemmas is he would make decisions based off, some call it intuition, some call it his feelings or his reaction to how he saw things. Sometimes in politics, you have to take time out to logically think about the consequences of it. And sometimes the premature conversion of an opinion becomes policy.
Right. Last question to Professor Grant Pitman. You are in Australia, you look Australian politics also. I'm in Australia, we are Australian, and Dr. Bernard Malik, even though he's US and Australian, do you think the change of power in USA will ultimately going to have any change, any difference, or any enhancement with Australian relation or any Australian politics?
Today, both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader quickly came out and acknowledged the president-elect. And it was interesting, both comments were about their defence relationships, which have been connected since World War II. And I thought it was interesting that that was the only comments. They didn't talk about economic relationships, they didn't talk about technology or cybersecurity relationships, agricultural relationships, none of those things. It was primarily defence.
Why do you think they discuss only defence?
Mainly because there's a view that Australia may be vulnerable because we just don't have the defence capabilities that other countries around us have. So we always rely on England and America. So I think they're quick to reinforce the defence relationship we have with America and have had for over 70 years. 60 to 70 years.
Dr. Bernard Malik, Australian-American Dr. Bernard Malik, how you're looking, the Australian, again, we already have few issues on the Australian politics. Now US change on power. How you're looking this?
I don't think there will be any effect at all. US and Australia have been very friendly nations all the time, no matter what has happened in the world. And it's a friendship that is deep-rooted in shared goals and principles. So nothing will happen. It's just Prime Minister Scott Morrison was considered pushing Trump's agenda, and he was very close to him. But when it's like you have a song, the king is dead and king lives on. So it's the president of the US, it is not the person that is important. So the presidency is, yes, either Trump or Biden, makes no difference.
No difference. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Bernard Malik. Thank you, Professor Grant Pitman. I believe today we discussed mostly some sweet issues, both presidents, different personalities, and again, happen. But still, I like to close the show with the prediction of Dr. Bernard Malik that it might possible that there is still the things might change. This is one thing. And the second thing, which he also closed out, that he says, kings dies, kings appear. So there is nothing going to be changed in the world. Thank you, Professor, and thank you, Dr. Bernard.